good to be here in Detroit. It's my second visit. Here talking at Cranbrook about a month ago, but it's good to get out of there and see the rest of the city, and a beautiful city it is. We went on a little tour yesterday and I saw the Rouge plant over there, and all of those familiar images, even though I haven't been here, art history and tons of American documentation has shown those things. And it seems like giant ventricles and pipes, and it looks like the heart of America right there. And so it's I think it's a great thing for me to see and to understand where all of that vitality comes from. I'm going to start this talk, as I often do, with a passage from my favorite film, Superman the movie, from 1978, starring Christopher Reeve and Marlon Brando. I start this way because I like to draw the parallel between the superhero and the artist. And as artists, I feel like we are given certain powers. We're able to see through institutional barriers, through walls, to do the heavy lifting, things that other people sometimes can't do, and to just show a different kind of potential. And with that power comes a kind of a responsibility and obligation to a truth. And it's up to each artist to define what that truth is. Therefore, there is a multitude of different ones. But I think there should be a rigor and a kind of momentum to the artist's practice. And that's what I like to talk about. And I issue the, I guess, question to each artist out there. It's like, when did you come to realize what your destiny was? So anyway, at the beginning of this film, Marlon Brando speaks to a young Clark Kent. He says, "My son, you do not remember me. I am Jor-El. I am your father. By now you will have reached your 18th year as it is measured on earth. By that reckoning, I will have been dead for many thousands of your years. The knowledge I have matters physical and historic. I have given you fully on your voyage to your new home. These are important matters to be sure of, but still matters of mere fact. There are questions to be asked, and it is now time for you to do so. Here in this fortress of solitude, we shall try to find the answers together. So, my son, speak. Who am I? Your name is Kal-El. You are the only survivor of the planet Krypton, and even though you've been raised as a human, you're not one of them. You have great powers, only some of which you have as yet discovered. Come with me now, my son, as we break the bonds of your earthly confinement, traveling through time and space." So this first image is called Frosty, and I made this when I was around 22 years old. I was an undergraduate, and I was looking for an image that I could call my own. So quite naturally, I turned to the mirror. I got a piece of paper, and I painted this very straightforward portrait of myself. It looked like me, but it really didn't feel like me. So I went to my grandmother's garage, and I found an old green distressed vinyl tarp, and I glued that piece of paper to the tarp, and it started to feel a bit more like me, but it wasn't enough. I made some silk screens, and I silk screened over some of that information, and I got a sander, and I started to sand through the surface, and I realized something. It was through this intervention with the material that, in the layering of this material, that I started to unlock some sort of an essence. I started to see something familiar but it wasn't enough. So I painted over the top of all of that information, and finally, I was left with something that I could endorse, that I felt represented me. And that gives you a little bit of the background to my relationship to collage. Most of the work that I'm going to be showing you is heavily collaged, many different materials. Sometimes that doesn't come through in the slides, but I'm just letting you know that's how it works. I'll tell you a little bit about performance. So my first gallery show in Dallas, Texas, I was 23 years old, I think, at the time. People came into the gallery. They were expecting to see an artist wearing a suit, much like the one I'm wearing now, maybe holding a wine glass, ready to answer questions. But what they saw before them was a heap, some sort of a mound covered in stripes and fur and felt, and out the top was a little head snoring. I had deprived myself of sleep for several days and taken sleeping pills in order to not wake up during this performance. So every 30 minutes, the director of the gallery would come into the room, flip on the lights, turn off the alarm clock, climb a ladder, and feed me a bowl of Jell-O. The assistant director was underneath the armature of this creature, and she was blowing up balloons that corresponded to the color of Jell-O that I had just eaten. Over the course of the 2-hour opening, there were 4 different feedings, 4 different colors of Jell-O, and 4 different colors of balloons shoved out the butthole of the creature onto the floor, creating a floor covered in balloon shit. So this is the residue of this performance, the aftermath of this. And on the walls, you see plastic tops velcroed to the wall. I went to my past self, my 2-3-year-old version of me, and tried to find out what pure art making was about. And I remembered when I was that little, I would crawl around the house and open all the cabinets and unscrew all of the detergent tops, and I would mix those tops in with my toys, thus doubling my toy collection, because they were the same relative size, shape, color of the toys that I had. And they made sense to me as objects, as sculptures, as truths. So I started to collect them actively again. And also trying to develop a range for myself from representation, naturalistic representation, all the way to the other side of abstraction. And I wanted to believe in the whole spectrum and figure out a way I could incorporate all of these ideas of making into my own work. So gluing these tops to a piece of canvas made sense to me. It's something that I could endorse. I could say, that's mine. I feel good about it. And then doubling back and thinking about it narratively, I thought maybe this is what these mound creatures think. Maybe this is, they communicate through color. So this is some sort of a communication from the forest where these creatures are. And this is one of the first mound that I made on paper. It's felt and fur and acrylic on paper, called coon wound. And this is one of the second representations of a mound I made. He's a malformed mound on canvas. His name is the Bebeaver. And this is called, And Then I Saw Her Face, Now I'm a Bebeaver. This is a Negro Maniac 5 times fast. Coon Bear the Legend, Jr. So now I'll tell you a little bit about veganism. When I went up to graduate school in Philadelphia from Texas, I hadn't met that many vegetarians and definitely had never heard of vegans, but I was willing to get with any of these ideologies and understand them. I just was curious. I ended up being roommates with a husband and wife who were vegans, And it was good at first, but then they became much harder to live with over time. They got preachier and preachier, and I got more annoyed, and I didn't know what to do, so I started to draw horrible portraits of them to make myself feel better. This is an image of me at the dinner table eating vegans for dinner. This is called salad. So when vegans get together, it's called a salad. So when I got out of graduate school, I continued to draw these characters, and I stripped them of their humanity. They became more insect-like, more alien-like, goblin-esque even. And I realized something after a while, that as I continued to draw them, it wasn't so much about the absurdity of picking on these people, but it was more about creating units of architecture, like taking these vegans as modules, doubling them and multiplying them, and creating these situations that move forward, up and down, back and forth in space, where I could create some new kind of architecture for the page. So this just became part of my vocabulary, this kind of bony line, if you will. I don't know how that got in there. Okay. So when I was in the 4th or 5th grade, I had just gotten glasses and wasn't feeling very good about myself. So what I did was I started to first write these stories about a superhero named Torpedo Boy. And Torpedo Boy was me, and I would take my glasses off and become this archetypal superhero. And then I would illustrate those stories. And he was something I could call my own, and he definitely was a way for me to escape that kind of, I guess, torture. And later on in life, I revived Torpedo Boy. I brought him back, and when he traversed that period of time, he became more flawed, he became more human, and quite frankly, much more interesting to deal with. He succumbed to the pleasures of the flesh. His ego was unnaturally large, maybe proportionate to how strong he was. Here's an image called Leave Salem, where Torpedo Boy is stepping on someone's face. This is Torpedo Boy kills shoplifters, so don't shoplift. So I developed this story to kind of articulate Torpedo Boy's behavior and tell a little bit more about what he was like. And I made a 10-drawing series, rather elaborate drawings, where I flipped the script, and Torpedo Boy sort of, he becomes the aggressor in this story, and the vegans are actually the innocents in this story. So he goes into the sewer where the vegans are having their sacred meal of tofu, and Torpedo Boy steals their tofu away from them and ducks into an alleyway to count his tofu. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees a beautiful prostitute named Trudy Fluso, and he offers her a block of tofu for her services. She finally agrees when he offers her 2 blocks of tofu. In graduate school, I made this work. This is called Wow, That's Me, and it's a 6 by 9 foot painting on canvas. And where I was at this point was this intense place of introspection. I was definitely looking inside myself, digging, almost as if a kind of archaeology. And I thought, well, if I'm doing that and I want my work to be a true mirror of what I'm doing, maybe my character should also look inward. So this was the mound looking inside of himself to see what he could find. And this was the first mound meat that I ever made, because it looks like the meeting of many mounds, but it's also the meat that's inside of the mounds. And I think with this piece, I made a material breakthrough. It's the first time I had carved into the canvas and then taken those bits of canvas and glued back on top. So the words, "Wow, that's me," are carved out of the surface. And those negative spaces provided me areas to kind of navigate around or respond to when I added the other more illusionistic elements to the painting. So I started to develop my vocabulary about deep space and flat space and when those things can work together and be interrupted. So here are a few more mound meats I'm going to show you. So I'll talk a little bit about the extended field of painting, or wall drawing. So this is at the Fort Worth Modern Museum, a work called Who. So basically, when I start these things, I'll start with a module and multiply and divide it until it becomes this total situation. And oftentimes, I'll hang paintings on top, or drawings on top of these wall drawings to kind of contextualize them within this new kind of a narrative where people feel like they're walking into a storybook or they're enveloped by information where there's nowhere to go. So I'm only in these for scale. This is in Rotterdam at the Museum Boijmans. This is at the now defunct Folk Art Museum in New York. And this is at the Istanbul Biennial of 2003. And for my room, they asked me, "What do you need?" And I said, "A toilet bowl, just sit it right down in the middle." And I figured I'd do that because people could have a place to sit and contemplate the work. It's where I get my best ideas, anyway. So now I'll just tell you some stories. 50,000 years ago, there was an ape man named Homer Buctus. And Homer Buctus wasn't the smartest ape man that ever lived, but he was dedicated to his family. He was a loving father, and he went out into the field, and he collected food for his family. That's what he did. And he had a beautiful ape family, an ape wife named Almacroin, and 2 ape children, Bruthuscam and Chromalina. Well, one day, when he went out into the field, he noticed something that he hadn't seen before. It was a section of the field that was so abundant with amazing prehistoric flowers. They were every shape and color and size that he could conceive of. And he didn't know what to do with all of this beauty, so he began to masturbate in this field. And he went home and returned the next day, and his seed had mixed with the flowers, and up sprang these hybrid creatures, these half-human, half-plant creatures called mounds. And he returned every day, and he fertilized again and again, and created more of these creatures. So after a while, there were hundreds of them. And then after another while, there were thousands of them. This is a piece called Fresher Field, where there is exactly 1,000 baby mounds in it. So I used that kind of general motif to create this work, which is about a 7 by 10 foot painting called Choir, because all of the baby mounds are speaking their first words in unison, which are colors, and it's as if they're singing in a choir. So I'll take this opportunity to walk you through the making of one of these works. So on the front, I carved out the words orange, yellow, green, blue, so on and so forth, and reverse appliqued the appropriate color from the back. So then that color shows through on the front. And when I flip it back over, I can get my paint and start to fill in flowers and other information, other colors, to start to build this kind of a grid. And you can see where the mound shapes are starting to appear. And from there, I can get my fake fur and felt and paint and whatever I need and start to fill in those spots. So it kind of goes from very general to this very specific kind of thing. And here you have the finished work. So at some point, Homer Buctus was in the field, and the flowers began to speak to him. They said, "Homer Buctus, we love you, and we want you to be a loving and caring father to all of your new mound babies." So this is a work called "We Love You," and I used it as a jumping off point to make this piece, also called "We Love You," where the words are becoming the speakers, so the words are becoming flowers. I wanted to make sort of a psychedelic poster kind of a thing out of this. And I can start to, or you can start to see my love of textile design. So, as part of this Genesis body of work, I made 52 portraits of baby mounds. And I arrived at the number 52 by going through the alphabet twice. So each one is named after a letter of the alphabet. This one's I, etc. This one is expect sex. And I named this one after one of my favorite horror films, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At the beginning of that movie, the doomed children are in a graveyard, and there's an old gentleman laying on his back, clutching a gravestone in one hand and a bottle of whiskey in the other. And he looks up at them and says, "I see things." The title of this one is "I See Things." And this is mound number 1, The Legend, and you'll see much more of him later. And I was fortunate enough to work with a wallpaper designer to create some wallpaper for this body of work. And this is one of the drawings that I used to bring to the designers, and we sat down and we created a repeat and ultimately printed actual wallpaper. So here we have a show for a floor of flora, and the wallpaper is on the walls, and they have these beautiful hardwood floors, and it created sort of this large domestic scene, like a giant living room. So at some point, Bruthascam and Chromalina, the two ape children, discovered what their father was up to, and they were overcome with anger and jealousy and hatred. And they grabbed tree branches and they stomped out into this field and began to clobber their half-brothers and sisters over the head, and they were kicking them and choking them until all of their pink blood and their mound meat was spilled on the ground. And these little mounds can't get up and run away because they're half plant. They're rooted in the earth. All they can do is wobble back and forth. And thousands of baby mounds wobbling in fear and pain created an earthquake. The earth split open and swallowed up Bruthascam and Chromalina, and they were banished to the lower realm, where they were forced to live out the rest of their days. And while they were down there, they became husband and wife. They procreated and created an inbred race of creatures who were hell-bent upon going back up on top of the earth to destroy the rest of these living baby mounds. And these were the first vegans. And this is wallpaper also that I've made, and it's made with blacklight ink, and it's also 3D, so it's really a trippy kind of a thing. And you can see the ape arms, soon to be vegan arms, coming in and stabbing these creatures and creating this kind of a charged situation of what I call the Great Mound Massacre. And this is a work that I made called Wow, That's Mean, and it's in response to the wallpaper. So here it is hanging on top of the paper. Here's some schmuck looking at the wallpaper. So Homer Buctus realized what these vegan aggressors were up to, and he wanted to protect his mound babies, so he uprooted the living ones, and he drugged them to different parts of the earth, and he replanted them and sprinkled seeds around them in hopes that one day great forests would grow up to protect them from the vegan aggressors. So let's jump 50,000 years into the future. This is closer to present day. Here we are in the forest. And this is a great time to introduce you to a character named Lloyd. Lloyd is the reason we can see words in my work. And he's a father type of an energy, and he sees everything in black and white. And he's the giver of sometimes very hard information. And here he is speaking to this mound, telling him that something weird is about to happen. This is a message called Get Goat. And the message is getting clearer. Here we have friends indeed. And this is the final message regarding this issue. This is remember with memory. And I came to realize that this is called a death flash. What Lloyd is about to tell this mound is something horrible, that he's about to pass away, and his material is going to become one with the forest. And here's how it happened. This is a small graphite drawing, and we now see that the vegans have made their way into the forest, and they're picking this mound apart from the inside out, collecting his mound meat in buckets. And from that small drawing, I made this rather large painting. It's about 8 by 10 feet, called The Legend is in Trouble. And I wanted every mark that I made on it, every time I cut it with scissors or hit it with an X-Acto knife, I felt maybe like I was the vegan destroying this creature, but at the same time I'm building it up. I wanted the marks to bespeak the nature of the activity. This is called A Yank, a Tug, and a Yank. Vegans do their dirtiest work. And this is a study, as the other two are also studies for this piece, called And the Branches Became as Storm Clouds. And this is an 8 by 8 foot work. And it's essentially the same as The Legend is in Trouble, but I wanted to tighten the focus of what was happening and maybe look through maybe a different lens. So different things are highlighted this time. You're seeing maybe more of the whimsical elements, and I get to speak to one of my favorite histories, that of cartooning, like Tex Avery and John Crispolucci, Ralph Bakshi, and the like. Get a sense of the scale of the work. Now I'll introduce you to a character named Painter. And Painter is sort of the opposite side of the Lloyd coin. She's a spirit energy, and she's the reason we can see color within my work. Within this piece called Right Before the Fight Before, Lloyd and Painter are coming down from the heavens, and they're arguing over who gets this mound's soul after he passes away. And this is called Painter and Lloyd Struggle for Soul Control. And where was Torpedo Boy during all of this? I realized that Torpedo Boy is actually the son of Painter and Lloyd, and he was sent to Earth to protect these mounds from vegan aggressors because they have no way of protecting themselves. But he arrived too late to the forest, and he had to pay a toll to get in. This is a work called Toll. And this is a piece called Too Late, where Torpedo Boy is now standing in front of this dying mound, and he's trying to scrape up the mound meat and spackle it back on, and his tears are streaming down and mixing with the mound's pink blood. And this is a 12-foot tall monolith of a painting called Torpedo Boy Tries His Darndest to Stop an Oozing Mound Meat. And it's a quilt of sorts, and the things making it up are these yellow hands, which stand for Torpedo Boy, and these chunks of mound meat, which, when I double them over and around and put them on top of the mound meat, it looks like he's feverishly trying to put this creature back together. And I cut the words darn out of the painting. And afterwards, someone mentioned that darning is a way of mending quilts. And that's just one of those weird cosmic things that happens in my studio. The legend breathes his very first death breath. The legend attempts to put out his own fire of life. So when the mound meat hit the ground, it became as fire, and it rose up and it singed this mound's fur. So as a defense mechanism, he shoots out cool streams of mound meat to put out the hot. But he only is fueling the fire. The fire rises even higher and engulfs this great creature. And this is the study for the life and death of number one. And this is the life and death of number one. I've chosen to highlight the words, the fade of one. So here we have, it's about 7 feet tall and 13 feet wide, called By and By. And all of the mound's fur and mound meat have evaporated and melted away, and what's left is this perfect white tree with a skull at the top. The mound's remains, and the animals from the forest and surrounding areas have come to pay their last respects for this great creature. So I'll tell you a little bit about a moment in vegan history where there was actually a good vegan. It was the second era of veganism, and there was a vegan priest named Sesame. And Sesame meditated every day and every night, just like any good vegan should do, and he respected Lloyd's Law. He had no material possessions, and he took his one tofu sacrament a year, and but he knew that there was something more to life, that maybe things weren't always so black and white. And it was this inquisitive space in his brain that was open for Painter to come in and visit him. Every night she would visit him in his dreams and show him a color. And vegans don't understand what color is, so he was very confused as to what this was all about. So one night, Painter showed him the full spectrum of color, and he had this orgasmic, insane dream. He woke up waving his arms in excitement, and he was crying. And when he focused, he saw standing before him the image of Painter, and she spoke to him. She said, "Behold, I am Painter, and these are colors. These are the sensations withheld from vegan kind since the beginning." And she went on to tell him that vegans and mounds were actually related and fathered by the same being who was human. And vegans were once human, and they had to try and regain their humanity. And the only way to do this was to befriend mounds and ask them for some of their mound meat that they could ingest so they could see colors. And it was through these colors that they would see that they were saved. So Sesame gathered up his 8 disciples, and they started to preach this message of color in the underworld. This was the cult of color. Sesame was strong in the ways of color. Here we have him walking on a sea of mound meat. This is Das Plimt. This is a work called Sesame's Dream. It's a 5 by 5 foot painting, and written out in this work is Painter's address to Sesame. And he's in the middle, waving his arms in excitement. This is called Sesame's Mission, and carved out of the surface of this piece is Painter's message to Sesame to go above ground and befriend this mound and show himself friendly, and that mound will give to him mound meat to use in the rituals. This is a work called Sesame's Chamber, and I took this as an opportunity to create these felt and paint banners that hung from the ceiling, creating a room. And when you go inside the room, you see his bed and his furniture. I actually inherited these from my grandfather, and I turned the dressers into speakers, which are shooting out sounds, songs, Muzak versions of songs with colors in the title, Little Red Corvette, theme to the Pink Panthers, so on and so forth. And in the bed frame are 9 buckets, 1 representing Sesame and 8 his disciples, and they're filled with Pepto-Bismol, which is the stand-in for mound meat. So when people walked into this room, they were struck with the amazing color and the sounds and the smells. I wanted to be a super sensory experience. This is a work called Cult Jam, where the vegans are indulging in this orgiastic ritual behavior. This gives me an opportunity to align myself with characters like Hieronymus Bosch. So one of the vegans that was actually tricked into being in the cult of color was the smartest vegan that ever lived. His name was Beto Wachow, and he was a vegan scientist. He had 5 brains, and when he was in the cult of color, they used him to create what's called miracle machines. And miracle machines are machines where you can put mound meat in one end and out the other come color blasts that are so bright that even unconverted vegans can see these colors and become converted. And this is a miracle machine powered by hundreds of little vegans sucking mound meat through straws. And sometimes they ran out of mound meat and they had to go back above ground to refuel. And here's a painting where painter is coming down from the heavens and helping humanely milk a mound. So I'll walk you through some of the miracle machines. This is miracle machine number 2, the vegan-made egg spit. Miracle machine number 4, the patented energy saver. Miracle machine number 5, the Deblin technique at work. Miracle machine number 6, Craftmaster. Miracle machine number 11, Musacrilege. The very middle of a sweet journey. Miracle machine number 9, the furnace that burned together goodness. Miracle machine number 13, good vegan. This is a miracle machine called Beacon. A miracle machine called the Hand of Glory. Las Luces, Luces and Losses. Stone prone. The abysmal, dismal, baptismal. The cult of color. In the Blestian Room. The Blestian Room is a cave within a cave within a cave where these wayward thinking vegans conduct their crazy color rituals far away from the watchful eyes of the vegan purists who are intent on destroying everything that they stand for. So somewhere along about the halfway point of this body of work, I worked on it for around 7 years. I realized that this story had to slowly come to an end, that darkness had to be restored to the underworld. But how would I do that pictorially over the course of the next years? So there was a point where I felt like paranoia was introduced into the story, and the vegan purists started to catch the trail of these good vegans, and they were trying to snuff out all of the color. So it was in this state of paranoia and fear and hiding that I found that it was more effective to use parts of vegans as opposed to whole ones. So maybe you would see a vegan hand or a foot or a head peeking out of a corner. Gave me a chance to sort of pare down things and create a more intense emotional atmosphere. This is a work called Aborted But Beautiful. This is Brisk Bones Befallen. Morsel. Bound. Give them an inch, they'll take a foot. The third to the last big hurrah. And this piece to me sort of had a sound or soundtrack that went to it that sounded like some sort of vegan industrial revolution with beams clanking together and gears turning. the march of the Asa lanterns. Quick fixing and color mixing. You're late. And these are install shots of the Blestian room. So I worked with Harlan and Weaver Press in New York and created a series of color etchings called The Ossified, Theosified, ossification being a process of becoming bone-like, and theosophy, one definition being a religion based in the spectrum of color. Sesame. The disciples. Harmony. I took the title of this one from my favorite television show as a child, The Incredible Hulk. During the pilot episode, or right before the pilot aired, there was a black screen with an ominous hum behind it, and the white words popped up on the screen. Within each of us oft times dwells a mighty and raging fury. Fountain. Aborted but beautiful. And this is a piece simply titled Vegan Arm. I made this at Graphic Studios in Florida, and it extends from the wall 9 feet, magically holding a string which is attached to a bucket of Pepto-Bismol. And to me, this was sort of an economic drawing in space more than it was a sculpture. And in 2005, I was approached by Stephen Mills, the head choreographer at Ballet Austin, and he was looking to collaborate with a visual artist, using that artist's vision as the starting point for a new dance piece. And I was at a point where I was ready to kind of move out of the studio and do something risky, and so this was sort of perfect. So we brought on Graham Reynolds, who's a composer, and he composed original music for the piece. And the work was actually restaged a few months ago for its second run in Austin, and we're hoping to travel the piece. But so I wrote it, and anything visual I made or designed, including the costumes. So this is a perfect point to talk about the character Beto Wachau. He was the vegan scientist that was tricked into being in the group. So when he came out of his brainwashing and realized where he was, a part of his nature was unlocked called the black brain, and his skin went from being white to jet black. And he rewired all of his miracle machines to be smearical machines. So instead of shooting out color, they shot out black eggs, and these eggs hatched and became darkness babies. And darkness babies' only reason for existence is to destroy color. So he created this dark army that began a war with the cult of color. I collaborated, I brought in with the ballet project the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia, an institution that works with artists that may or may have not worked in textile or fabric or printmaking, and they do large-scale projects. So I brought them in to help me make one of the backdrops for the ballet, the forest backdrop. So all of those trees are cut out, hand cut out of felt and other fabric, and then hand sewn onto this quilted support. And it's about 60 feet long. So after the ballet was over, and this is in around 2008, I was anxious to get back to the studio to sort of finish out the Saint Sesame story and move on with my life. I was ready to kill off Sesame and get to something new. But it wasn't so easy. I kind of had to reconfigure a new story or something new out of these old bits. And what I found that was left over that was usable were these vegan heads. This is a piece called Reveal, and that led me to this, which is called Fear. And this is the first of the Fear heads. And this is a 5 by 5 foot painting with a very specific kind of architecture to it. There's the head in the middle and the background behind, and then the two eye spaces. And I figured, I gave myself the challenge of how many paintings could I make using this skeleton and just filling in the spots with different motifs, maybe some from past works, some new kind of patterns that I was coming up with. This is a work called Calm. I read A Happy Place. Blue-balled voice effects. Hello, hollow lullaby. A tippy head run. The crest of civil unrest. Give me my flowers while I yet live, version 2. Mold. That's a close-up of mold. Duel by a bleeder. And here we have an install shot of the show Fear. And I realized when I stepped back from it, it's one of the first times I've used the wall as a stage, and the paintings for the first time weren't spaces for characters to interact more than they were actual characters themselves. So they became almost dancers on a stage. The Meddler. Munch. Bouquet decay today. Dissension and dissension. The bad promise. So from that painting I made this installation, the sculptural installation, at the Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle called A Better Promise. And it's vinyl on aluminum. And underneath are vitrines, which the public was encouraged to bring in their unrecyclable plastic tops to fill in the appropriate colors. So over the course of 2 years, those vitrines filled up. This is the color coffin. And here we have the color coffin in the context of a show called Work While It Is Day, for when night cometh no man can work. This was sort of the first show that I did to kind of really move away from the narrative that I had set up over the past 10 or so years. And I was truly transitioning to something else. A lot of self-portraiture started to show up again. I'm dealing with, my own skin again. But also these ideas of death and melancholy. Around this same time as my characters were dying off, there were some deaths in my family of very important people. And I returned to the studio with this question, how do you go on in the face of such intense life changes, with this awareness of mortality, just a new understanding of time. And I don't know, it started to reflect itself in the work. I just kept working through the images. I didn't stop making things, but you can start to see this kind of torture or dealing with something in the work, I guess. We done all we could, and none of it's good. Smoked. I did it anyways. You are what you meet. Man don't work, don't eat. Torpedo Boy and Heron Hazo. I really do love myself. The doorstop. Like a Thief in the Night, version 1. Like a Thief in the Night, version 2. The Everlasting Arms, version 1. The Everlasting Arms, version 2. Feet. And this is a rather large piece, I think it's 7 by 10 feet, called Hot Coals in Soul. And part of this work, collaged in it, is 10 years worth of my collected used odor eaters. And then it all came back to me. The regent of positivity. The hiker. 1, 1, 1, and 1. When they found me, I wasn't there. Waiting. Dead ringer on my phone. She'll know me when she sees me. The moment of truce. You're unfortunate if you're disproportionate, so stop forcing it. This is a little print collage called Twitty. I made this last year after I re-engaged with one of the houses that I grew up in was my grandmother's house, and in her den area there was this 70s floor tile, and I remember being 2, 3 years old, laying on that tile, learning how to draw, and I would look up at her, and she's sitting on the couch making her quilts, and there was this kind of very intense connection that we had, and I wanted to commemorate that floor, that space, and in looking for a new foundation in my work, I thought it was only natural to go back to the floor. And in some ways, I didn't find it, it found me. It really rose, or it was revealed to me again, because I hadn't seen that floor in a number of years, because she moved out of the house and in with my mother, and I was up at Cornell giving a lecture, and one of the grad students had me over to his house, and I went upstairs and to use the restroom, and there in that bathroom was this floor tile, and I freaked out. I took pictures of it with my phone, sent them to my mom, to my brother, and everyone knew immediately what it was, and I felt like I got an answer to some question that I had put out there. So I decided to make this painting, which is a 7 by 11 foot work called The Den, and it's just very straightforward, very deadpan, an homage to that floor tile. The irreducible crucible. Kept on keeping on. Qui est, or guess who? As you now enliven a test, set an evil new on USA. That's the second longest palindrome I've ever written, by the way. Plate of shrimp. The former and the latter. Black Mamba. Frankly, he's disingenuous and he's friends with us. The shame game. The impatience of progress. My first Italian trip, no gas. dangerous tours and snares. This is the way. The cross of eyes reossifies the loss of lies. Private dancer. If you're too fat, then you should buy clothes that fit. 4 hours in this wretched contraption. Quentin, Trenton. Hit the ground punching. All things known and nothing to own. Portrait of the artist under night. With the money I have left, all I can do is buy myself some extra time. And I'll show you a few of my mural projects. These are large-scale vinyl murals. I work with billboard printers and designers and develop these motifs, and they print them out using the biggest printers you've ever seen. This is at the Dallas Cowboys Football Stadium, and it's 108 feet by 3 stories tall, called From a Legend to a Choir. And this is at the Herman Memorial Children's Hospital in Houston, outside of the cancer unit. And they approached me wanting something, of course, life-affirming for the kids. And I based this work on the work called By and By, where the mound is dead and the animals are crying, but couldn't very well have that out in front of the cancer unit. So I made this one where we go back in time, where the mound is happy and all the animals are happy. And this is called High and High. And I hear that the little kids really like it, and gave me a chance to help to understand and explore the medicinal qualities of art. And I'm going to end with this image. This is Old Judd, and he's from one of my favorite horror films as of recently, called Eaten Alive, and it was directed by Tobe Hooper, who also directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of obsessed with these horror films set in Texas, not far away from where I grew up in Paris, Texas, because there are some very creepy characters in those corridors from, I'd say, Houston all the way up to where I'm from. And I dare not go back in there without a full tank of gas, but it's fun to look at their craziness through the filter of the film. Anyway, in this movie, Judd, played by Neville Brand, who was an amazing actor, very volatile actor, in the 40s and 50s, he used to star in westerns. But this is probably one of his best performances because it gave him a chance to highlight, I feel like, his true nature of just being an absolutely crazy person. And so he has a hotel out in the middle of the woods, and anyone who checks into this hotel, well, Judd has on his glasses, and he's looks like a nice enough guy, and he checks him in. But soon after, he has a psychotic breakdown, and he takes off his glasses and grabs a Grim Reaper sickle and hits them with it and pushes them over the porch into a pool which has a giant crocodile in it. And the movie just continues on and on like that. But anyway, so in the middle of this film, Judd is in his office area, and he's looking over some tax receipts and stuff like that, and he's taking glasses on and putting them on and taking them off, and if you look closely, they don't have any lenses in them, so he's just being a nut. But he's taking them off, putting them on, and which is an interesting answer to Superman, who puts his glasses on and becomes a different person. But anyway, he starts humming this song, and then he starts to sing this song that I thought was really beautiful. And I went to the internet and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I'm thinking that Neville Brand may have made this song up on the spot. And it goes, down, round, tumble down, standing round in the rain. Ain't got no ticket, ain't got no bag, still I'm waiting on the train. Thank you.